As an Omega, I'd been the nemesis of an Alpha, Ethan Lancaster, for over a decade. On the eve of our graduation, we had an unexpected one-night stand. I fled in panic the moment I woke up. It wasn't until my family went bankrupt and I had nowhere else to go that I showed up at his door, baby in my arms. "Eth, please let me stay. I honestly have nowhere else to go." He stared hard at the baby in my arms, his voice a low growl. "You want me to take in my nemesis and some other guy's kid?" That's when I realized the moron didn't remember our night together at all. "Eth, please, I'm begging you, let me stay." I clutched my sleeping baby as Ethan stood in the doorway, looking down on me. My nerves made me tighten my grip on the baby. The news of the Sterling family's bankruptcy was all over town. Our house and all our assets had been seized. Accustomed to a life of luxury, I was suddenly at a complete loss. I tried to find a job, but no one would hire an Omega with a child. If I hadn't been completely out of options, I never would have come to Ethan. After all, the baby was his too. Seeing Ethan remain silent, I swallowed my pride. I just need a place to sleep. "As soon as I find a job, I'll take the baby and leave. I won't be a bother." After a half-minute of silence, Ethan finally spoke, his tone still sharp. "Where's the baby's father?" "Why don't you go to him?" His question made me look up, and I stared at him, stunned. "Don't you remember?" Should I remember something? Hearing that, a wave of grief I couldn't explain washed over me. I thought about the past few days, drifting from place to place with my baby, with no home to call our own. I'd gotten pregnant right after graduation. When I first found out, I even considered not keeping the child. I wasn't ready to be a mother, but in the end, I couldn't go through with it. Ethan's words were the last straw, shattering the stubborn pride I had clung to for days. I had assumed Ethan never came looking for me because he didn't care. It turned out he didn't even remember. Suddenly, my eyes welled up. You're crying. Hey, don't cry. Fine, just get inside." Ethan, who had apparently never seen me cry before, seemed flustered, his voice softening into exasperation. Finally, he let me in, baby and all. I glanced around the apartment. It was a clean and tidy 3-bedroom in the city center, and it looked like he lived alone. The baby woke up and started waving his little hands and fussing. I placed him on the sofa and turned to Ethan. "Excuse me, do you have any hot water?" Ethan crossed his arms and nodded his chin in the direction of the kitchen. I took the formula out of my bag and prepared a bottle for the baby, who quieted down and began to drink peacefully. Ethan stood by, arms crossed, occasionally glancing over. "Does he not take care of you too? Who are you talking about?" "My family was bankrupt, our house seized, my father convicted. Who else was there to take care of me?" Ethan looked like he was grinding his teeth. "The baby's father. He just lets you raise a child all by yourself." The baby's father. I looked up, biting my lip as I stared at Ethan. "You're the baby's father, aren't you?" Worried the baby might start crying again, I tugged on Ethan's arm. "Let's talk somewhere else." The moment we stepped onto the balcony, Ethan's voice came down on me like a ton of bricks. "Julian Sterling, what were you thinking, having his kid at this age? And where is he now? Just left you high and dry. Did he abandon you because he was afraid of getting tied up in your family's mess? You must have been blind. Who is the father? I'll take you to him." I pressed my lips together tightly. Having just calmed down, I was now relieved to realize that Ethan truly had no idea he was the father. I didn't have to worry about him fighting me for custody. I quickly grabbed his hand. "No, don't go looking for him." Ethan's face darkened, turning almost black. "You're still defending him at a time like this, and to think I've considered you my rival all these years. You're such a disappointment." Then, his gaze fell on my hand holding his. "And playing cute won't work. You could say Ethan and I grew up together. Our families were of similar standing, and we met in the same kindergarten. He never liked me, not from the very beginning. In elementary school, I tried to make a peace offering, bringing him my favorite candy. He not only rejected it, but knocked the carefully chosen sweets from my hand. Julian Sterling, I hate you, having been pampered my whole life, and after several failed attempts to be friendly, I finally snapped. I hate you too. From that day on, Ethan and I were like fire and water. I stopped trying to be nice to him, and we both tacitly entered a state of competition. From grades and various competitions to all sorts of activities in college. Whenever we met, we'd always find a way to take a jab at each other. I thought it would always be like this. Until the night of our graduation, when my heat unexpectedly hit, we ended up in bed together. The next morning, terrified he would mock me, I fled. And I didn't see him again until my family went bankrupt and I had nowhere to go. The cool breeze on the balcony brought me back to the present. Please, I'm begging you, I don't have any other friends. Friends? Ethan froze for a moment. Was friend a word that could describe their relationship? The once dazzling young master of the Sterling family, always the center of attention wherever he went. One bankruptcy, and all those so-called friends had drawn a clear line. Ethan couldn't quite describe the feeling. It was like punching cotton, a dull ache in his chest. He felt that Julian was different now. He used to be so proud, like a peacock. But now he was so submissive, and the one who had tamed him was another alpha. As soon as I find a job and a place, I'll move out. I won't bother you for long. Perhaps it was an alpha's innate protectiveness over an omega, but he couldn't bring himself to say no. Ethan's apartment was large, and since he lived alone, there were no spare rooms set up. Doing a good deed all the way, when he heard Julian was going to tidy up the guest room, he offered up his master bedroom. You two can take the master bedroom. I'll sleep in the guest room. I felt a bit embarrassed. I couldn't possibly. Only the master bedroom has an air conditioner, and it's too late to have one installed today. It's hot now. If you don't want the baby to get sick. Ethan looked at Julian's delicate frame. He'd never noticed how thin he was before, but now he seemed to have lost quite a bit of weight. Thank you, Eth. This time, my gratitude was sincere. It wasn't until I was in the room and had put the baby down that my heart finally settled. I looked around Ethan's room. It was clean and minimalist, just like his personality. The sheets were deep blue, and the air held a faint scent of coffee, Ethan's pheromones. It wasn't as strong as it had been that night. Perhaps it was the comforting environment and the scent, but I fell asleep without realizing it, holding the baby. The master bedroom door wasn't fully closed, and Ethan glanced inside as he passed by. Julian was holding the child, the big one and the little one sound asleep. The scene had an inexplicably heartwarming feel to it. On impulse, he pushed the door open and went inside. He studied Julian first, then his gaze fell on the face of the child in his arms. He had inherited Julian's skin tone, fair and tender, with chubby cheeks, a bottle still in his mouth. A faint milky scent, tinged with coconut, emanated from the baby. It smelled a bit like coconut milk. It had only been a little over a year since they'd last seen each other. He never would have imagined that a year later, Julian would show up at his home with a child. What would Julian's baby feel like? The next second he reached out and poked his cheek. In his sleep, the baby's hand flailed and grabbed his fingertip. A strange, magical feeling spread through Ethan's heart. I opened my eyes to see someone squatting by the bed. When my senses returned, my eyes met Ethan's. I heard him speak. Julian Sterling, is this really your kid? My heart leaped into my throat. Had Ethan remembered something? He's so chubby and fair. Did you really give birth to him? You didn't just find him somewhere, did you? After he finished, my anxiety vanished. He's mine. The baby was still asleep, his tiny hand clutching Ethan's finger. Ethan used his other hand to poke the baby's tender cheek again. Stop poking him, you'll wake him up. Ethan, feeling playful, feigned annoyance. I gave up my bed for this little rascal to sleep in. I can't even touch him a couple of times. Hey, tiny terror, your mother is such a little heartless thing. Don't you grow up to be like him. I am not, don't talk nonsense. I pushed Ethan's hand away and wrapped my arms around the baby, glaring at Ethan to stop him from spouting more foolishness. Seeing the protective look on the just woken Julian's face, Ethan's lips curled into a smirk. Teasing Julian successfully brought him a spark of joy, but in the next second, he paid the price for his actions. Because the baby did wake up and began to wail, his loud cries instantly shattering the room's tranquility. Ethan, having no experience with children, didn't know how to handle it. Seeing the tiny face scrunch up and hearing the ear-splitting sobs, he suddenly panicked. He almost instinctively threw his hands up in a not-my-fault gesture. His voice was a mix of innocence and bewilderment. Holy crap, this wasn't my fault. I just poked him gently a couple of times. I shot him a helpless look and quickly bent down, carefully lifting the baby into my arms and rocking him gently to soothe him. But the little guy wasn't having it. His crying didn't stop, and he kept nuzzling against my chest. He's probably hungry, I concluded, my cheeks flushing. Ethan clearly didn't get it. Hungry, then go make some more formula. As he spoke, he instinctively turned his head towards the door as if to go get the bottle. No. My voice was even lower, my face burning with embarrassment. I could feel my ears getting hot. Sometimes he wants to eat directly. The implication couldn't have been clearer. Ethan's head snapped back, his gaze accidentally falling on my chest before darting away as if he'd been burned. All the playful confidence he'd had moments ago vanished without a trace. A distinct blush rapidly spread from his neck to the tips of his ears. Oh, he stammered, his voice tight as he shuffled awkwardly towards the door. Well, you get to it then. He practically stumbled out of the bedroom, almost tripping over his own feet, and thoughtfully, or rather, frantically pulled the door shut behind him. With a soft click, the room was left with just me and the still whimpering baby. Holding my child, I stared at the closed door, the heat in my face slow to fade. But a sense of relief washed over me, mingled with an indescribable awkwardness. Outside, Ethan leaned his back against the cool wall and let out a long breath, raising a hand to rub his still burning ear. Inopportunely, his mind flashed back to the slight swell of Julian's chest. He had lost weight everywhere else, making his chest seem all the more prominent. Then he thought of Julian's flushed cheeks. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration and cursed under his breath. Damn it. That night, Ethan's sleep was anything but peaceful. He dreamed he was holding a warm, soft body in his arms. The skin was smooth, carrying a familiar, sweet scent of coconut that was utterly intoxicating. He instinctively pulled the person closer. The waist under his palm was so slender he could encircle it with one hand, yet it possessed a resilient strength. He lowered his head, following his instincts to kiss a slightly raised area. The touch was unbelievably soft, with a hint of milky wetness that made his blood rush south, leaving him restless and aroused. Lost in a haze of passion, he lifted his head, trying to see the face of the person beneath him. What met his eyes were Julian's, misty and red rimmed at the corners, looking at him with a gaze that was part complaint, part plea. A jolt shot through Ethan. He sat bolt upright in bed, his heart pounding like a drum. Fuck, why would I dream about Julian Sterling? And a dream like that, he panted heavily in the darkness. The tactile sensations and visual impact of the dream were so real they left his whole body burning with heat. What made it worse was when he threw back the covers and saw the tent pitched there, a clear testament to the dream's direct effect. Shit, he cursed, practically tumbling out of bed and into the bathroom, where he twisted the cold water knob. The next morning, Ethan came downstairs with faint dark circles under his eyes. His gaze immediately fell on the figure in the kitchen. Julian stood with his back to him, busy at the stove. He was wearing slightly oversized loungewear, which made him look even thinner. The air was filled with the faint aroma of cooking rice and a subtle, almost imperceptible hint of Julian's own coconut-scented pheromones. It should have been a warm and peaceful scene. But Ethan's feet were suddenly nailed to the floor, his throat tight. The images from last night's dream assaulted him again, uncontrolled. The waist he had held so tightly, the soft, milky touch. He almost instantly averted his gaze, feeling even more frustrated. I heard the footsteps and turned around. Good morning, I made breakfast. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with disbelief. You can cook breakfast, I nodded, placing the soft cooked porridge and side dishes on the table. Yeah, I feel bad living here for free. It's just a small thing, a way to thank you. My voice trailed off, tinged with an imperceptible trace of shame. Ethan said no more and pulled out a chair to sit down. I pushed a bowl of porridge towards him, and after a moment's hesitation, spoke. After we eat, could you come with me to buy some baby things? Ethan understood the principle of not biting the hand that feeds you. What do you need? He asked, scooping up a spoonful of porridge. A stroller, I explained. That way when I go out to look for a job, I can put the baby in it. It'll be more convenient. Ethan's movements paused. The awkward dream from last night came to mind, and the words of refusal on the tip of his tongue were swallowed back down. He managed to spit out a single, curt word. Fine. From that day on, I officially settled into Ethan's home. During the day, Ethan was a busy man at the Lancaster group. But sometimes, when he got off work early or was home on weekends, he would clumsily help me with the baby. From initially making formula that was either too hot or clumpy, he gradually mastered the water temperature and shaking technique. From his first diaper change, a chaotic mess where he nearly tangled himself up with the baby, he eventually became quick and efficient. Though he'd still complain impatiently, "This little rascal is so much trouble," his actions became more and more practiced each time. Meanwhile, I found a job at a bakery near the apartment. The pay wasn't high, but luckily the owner, a kind-hearted beta woman named Mrs. Baker, learned of my situation and allowed me to bring the baby to work. I was finally no longer completely dependent on Ethan. I could start saving money, however little, through my own efforts. Until the day our peace was shattered. That night, Ethan was working late at the office. The baby, now bigger and more energetic than when he first arrived, usually needed Ethan's gruff coaxing to fall asleep after he got home. But that evening, the little one was unusually quiet, falling asleep early without a fuss. At first, I was relieved, thinking my child was becoming more considerate, but as midnight approached, I touched his forehead and my heart sank. It was burning hot. The baby had a fever, his small body was curled up, his face flushed red, and his breathing was shallow and rapid. Panic seized me. Back when I was still the young master of the Sterling family, I always had nannies and a family doctor. I never had to worry about such things. The baby had been so well behaved since birth, never getting seriously ill, and I had no experience. An immense fear gripped me. The ride-sharing apps had no drivers available, and tears of frustration streamed down my face. The time we'd spent together had made me reliant on Ethan. He was the only person I could think of. The moment the call connected, I blurted out, my words a jumbled mess. "Eth, what do I do? The baby. The baby's sick, he has a fever, and I can't get a car." Ethan on the other end of the line seemed to freeze for a second, then his voice tightened, but it was reassuring. "Don't panic. I'll be right there." After hanging up, Ethan stared at his computer screen, but he couldn't read a single word. His mind was filled with Julian's panicked, helpless voice choked with tears. He yanked at his tie in frustration. That familiar, overwhelming urge to protect him surged up again, stronger than ever before. He grabbed his car keys and practically ran to the elevator. When he got home, he saw Julian holding the baby, tear tracks on his face, his eyes red and swollen. The moment Julian saw him, the dependence and vulnerability in his eyes were almost overflowing. Ethan's heart felt like it had been viciously squeezed. Without asking a single question, he walked straight over and took the baby from Julian's arms with unwavering firmness. "We're going to the hospital." Thankfully, the baby only had a slight fever. The doctor said it was likely a seasonal flu and that it would be best to observe him overnight. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that the baby's temperature finally dropped and he fell into a deep sleep. Only then did my frayed nerves, which had been on edge all night, finally relax. Ethan hadn't said much, but he had stayed by my side the entire time, handling payments, picking up medication, and communicating with the doctor. He managed everything with perfect composure. Now, as he looked at Julian, that indescribable annoyance surfaced again, mixed with a strange, new softness. His voice was lower and gentler than usual. "It's okay. The doctor said it's nothing serious. I'm here. You don't have to be afraid." That phrase, "I'm here," struck the softest, most vulnerable part of my heart. The hardship of raising a child alone, the sheer terror of discovering the baby was sick. All these emotions burst forth at once. Almost uncontrollably, I threw myself into his arms, burying my face in his chest, which smelled faintly of coffee and his pheromones. My voice was muffled. "Eth, you're so good to me. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." Ethan's body went rigid. He felt the soft, trembling body in his arms. Finally, he raised his hands and began to awkwardly pat Julian's slender back. He grunted softly, his Adam's apple bobbing unconsciously. Under the quiet lights of the hallway, their embracing figures, with the sleeping baby on the nearby bed, looked just like a family of three. He looked down at the soft hair of the person in his arms, inhaling that sweet coconut and milk scent. For the first time, he thought that maybe, if it was always like this, it wouldn't be so bad. Leaning against his chest, my heart was a mix of sourness and fullness. These past few days, Ethan had been truly good to me and the baby. Though his words were often harsh, his actions never failed us. He learned how to take care of a child, allowed me to stay, and showed up the moment I was at my most helpless. He must like the baby, right? Maybe I should tell him the truth, tell him that the baby is our child. But the words died on my lips as if blocked by something. What if he found out the truth, remembered that night, and thought, what would he think? Although that night was an accident, my heat colliding with his drunkenness in his eyes, would it look like I had deliberately plotted it? After all, he used to hate me so much, saying all those hurtful things. If he knew the child was his, would he think I was trying to tie him down with the baby, to make him take responsibility? Would he hate me even more? Or worse, would he try to take the baby away from me? The thought of the disgusted look Ethan might give me, the cold questions he might ask, made the courage that had just bloomed wither away instantly. Ethan, feeling Julian's dependence, felt his heart fill with something soft and overwhelming. He only had to lower his head to smell the faint coconut scent on Julian. He used to find the smell a bit too sweet, but now it was soothing and comforting. It calmed his restless emotions. What kind of cursed fate is this, he thought. His nemesis of over a decade was not only in his arms, but he was also worrying daily about him and his kid, some other damn alpha's kid. He cursed silently, feeling more and more off kilter. "Julian, what are you doing here?" I looked up and saw a familiar figure in a white coat. It was Sebastian Sullivan, an upperclassman from college. He was 2 years ahead of me, from a wealthy family, and known for his gentle nature. When my family's troubles began, he was one of the few who had genuinely offered to help, even offering financial aid, but I had refused, not wanting to be indebted to him. I stood up, feeling a bit awkward. "Sebastian, the baby has a bit of a fever, so we came to get him checked out," I explained, gesturing toward the hospital room. Sebastian peeked in at the sleeping baby, his tone a mix of concern and a barely perceptible reprimand. "I wasn't on the night shift yesterday, I just took over. Why didn't you contact me? I could have at least helped speed things up for you." "It's okay, Sebastian, it's all taken care of. The doctor said we can go home after a little more observation." I gave an embarrassed smile, feeling a pang of guilt for having refused his help before. Sebastian's gaze was warm and kind, as always. "Julian, I know you're proud, but if you ever face any difficulties, you have to tell me. I'm always here for you." He paused, his voice growing softer. "Sometimes I really wish you wouldn't always push me away." The protective undertone in his words made my heart tremble slightly, and I felt even more apologetic. I could only murmur, "Thank you, Sebastian." Sebastian had pursued me before, not even giving up when he learned I was pregnant, but I just didn't have those kinds of feelings for him, so how could I accept his help? Just then a cold, hard voice cut in, laced with clear displeasure. "Who's he?" I turned to see Ethan, who had returned at some point, holding a bag with steaming porridge and buns. His face, however, was darker than the sky outside. His sharp gaze swept over Sebastian like a knife, and a low-pressure front emanated from him. Sebastian looked at Ethan, then at the baby, his eyes fixed on me, and his tone was certain. "It's him." I knew what he meant and nodded. "I see. It looks like I'm completely out of the running then." Ethan was not used to being ignored, and seeing this alpha speaking so intimately with Julian moments before, his temper flared. "Who are you?" Sebastian offered a gentle smile. "I'm Julian's upperclassman. Just came to see him and the baby." Sebastian looked at the hostile Ethan, then at my embarrassed face, and gave a soft, knowing, and slightly resigned smile. "I have to get back to work. I'll go now." "Julian, bring the baby out to play sometime." His tone remained gentle. I nodded, relieved but also apologetic. "Goodbye, Sebastian." As Sebastian walked away, the hospital room was left with just Ethan and me. He shoved the bag of breakfast into my arms with a distinct roughness, nearly spilling the porridge. His face was ashen, his chest rising and falling with barely contained anger. He asked, almost biting out the words, "Is that the scumbag?" I didn't register at first. "What scumbag? Who else could it be?" Ethan's voice shot up, but he quickly suppressed it, mindful of the baby in the room, which only made him sound more like he was grinding his teeth. "The baby's father, that's him, isn't it? Looks decent enough, but he's the type to abandon his own family, and you were just smiling at him so happily." After saying this, his face grew even darker, and he unleashed all his pent-up resentment. "You're still thinking about a scumbag like that. What's so great about him? What's going on in that head of yours?" The more he spoke, the angrier he got. Seeing Julian's stunned expression, a strange mix of hurt and frustration clouded his judgment, and he blurted out, "I've been taking care of you two for this long, a whole living person standing right in front of you. Am I invisible to you?" The moment the words left his mouth, we both froze. What was he saying? Ethan realized his slip of the tongue. A flicker of unease crossed his face, and he sharply turned his head away. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration, awkwardly changing the subject, his voice reverting to its usual hard edge. "It's nothing, just eat your breakfast before it gets cold." After that day, the relationship between Ethan and me fell into a subtle, awkward state. To make matters worse, Ethan had to leave for a week-long business trip for an urgent project. The day he left, he just tossed a gruff, "Take care of yourself," and the little rascal over his shoulder and left with his suitcase. The apartment suddenly felt empty. It was just me and the baby, and although there was more space, I felt like a part of my heart had become empty too. That day, I was playing with the baby in the living room when a familiar heat started to build in my lower abdomen, making my legs feel weak. Oh no, it's my heat. I hadn't experienced a heat since giving birth, so I had somewhat forgotten about it. I managed to put the baby to sleep in his crib, but the waves of heat in my body grew stronger and stronger. My consciousness began to blur, and a rich coconut scent filled the air uncontrollably. I never expected Ethan to come back at that moment. When Ethan opened the door, the living room and kitchen were silent. No one was in sight. Julian. He called out a few times, but there was no answer. A faint, excessively sweet scent seemed to linger in the air. His heart tightened. He hurried to the master bedroom and pushed the door open. An overwhelmingly dense, sweet coconut aroma hit him, instantly enveloping him. "You're in heat," his voice was hoarse. He instinctively wanted to back away, but his feet felt nailed to the floor. The intense pheromones of an omega in heat were a powerful temptation for an alpha like him. His own coffee-scented pheromones began to stir uncontrollably. He spun around abruptly, his tone deliberately cold and hard. "I'll go buy you suppressants in Omega who has been fully bonded and has successfully given birth develops a deep dependency on their alpha's pheromones. Standard suppressants have little to no effect. A vast emptiness and craving consumed me. Seeing him about to leave, panic overrode my reason. Acting on pure instinct, I reached out and grabbed the corner of his shirt, my voice choked with sobs and agony. "Don't go. Suppressants won't work." Ethan's body went rigid. He turned to look at my hand clutching his shirt, a storm of emotions churning in his eyes. Of course, he knew why they wouldn't work. The thought of the alpha who had marked Julian, making him immune to suppressants, ignited a fire of nameless rage and fierce possessiveness. He let out a frustrated growl, suddenly leaning down and trapping me between himself and the bed. "They won't work. Then what do you want? You want me to go find that man for you?" He practically spat the words out, each one laced with fury. "Not a chance, Julian Sterling. Don't even think about it. You're staying by my side, you're not going anywhere." That familiar, non-negotiable, domineering tone made me feel as if I had been transported back to the days when we were at each other's throats. He was always like this, forceful, unreasonable. But now, the agony of my heat mixed with the hurt of being trapped by him, and I desperately needed to know by what right he could say such things. Tears welled up uncontrollably as I accused him, my voice thick with sobs. "What do you mean? Ethan, you always hate me, yell at me, and treat me badly. You've been avoiding me lately. The truth is, you just want me to leave sooner, don't you?" I accused him through tear-filled eyes. I remembered back in school how brilliant Ethan was. Anyone would be attracted to a handsome and talented alpha, and I was no exception. But when I tried to show my affection, all I got was Ethan's hostility. I knew it clearly. Ethan hated me for no reason at all. "When did I ever tell you to leave? You used to say you hated me." His voice was fierce. "That was before." "Before?" I seized on his words, stubbornly demanding an answer, my heat making me unusually sensitive and direct. "What about now? What does not hating me mean?" Ethan was cornered with nowhere to run. He took a deep breath, met my eyes, and his voice was rushed and harsh, but it held a raw, desperate honesty. "It means I like you now, all right." A torrent of emotion surged forth, drowning him. That was it. He had fallen for this Omega a long time ago. He didn't know when it started. Maybe it was seeing him sleeping so carefully in his bed, holding the baby. Maybe it was the complete dependence in his voice when he called in the middle of the night, crying for help. Or maybe it was even earlier, on the day he showed up at the door, disheveled and with a child, and Ethan, despite his harsh words, couldn't help but soften and let him in. The feelings had changed quietly, but he had stubbornly refused to admit it, deceiving himself with ridiculous excuses like nemesis and protective instincts. It wasn't until he saw that alpha, Sebastian, being so close to Julian in the hospital that the violent possessiveness threatening to burst from his chest finally snapped him to his senses. He had been so angry he'd spoken without thinking, ranting about scumbags and abandoning family. It was less about accusing the non-existent father of the child and more about venting his own ugly, barely hidden jealousy. He was terrified that Julian truly had someone else in his heart. Now those long-suppressed thoughts could no longer hide. He remembered why he hated Julian so much long ago. It was because Julian was always so pretty and proud, like a little son, attracting everyone's attention wherever he went. Especially the other alphas, who buzzed around him like bees to honey. The young Ethan didn't understand that dull, irritable feeling he got whenever he saw Julian smile at someone else. He just found this Omega incredibly annoying for stealing everyone's attention. He mistook that inexplicable possessiveness and irritation for hatred. So he began to antagonize him, using competition and provocation to capture his gaze, as if that would prove he was the special one. He had used the wrong method. turning a budding affection into a rivalry that lasted for over a decade. Not until Julian showed up with a baby did they reconnect. He thought he was too late, that Julian could never be his. As he was lost in his own thoughts, the person beneath him tugged at his collar. Her breath ghosted over his ear, and he heard Julian say, mark me." With a boom, his reason instantly shattered. Ethan had a dream. In the dream, he was back at the night after the graduation ceremony. He'd had too much to drink, his head was heavy, and all he wanted was to lie down somewhere. He stumbled into the room he had booked upstairs, and had just collapsed onto the bed when the door was slammed open. A figure staggered in, carrying an abnormally rich, sweet scent of coconut that instantly filled the room. Even though he was drunk, he recognized him. It was Julian. His cheeks were flushed an unnatural red, his eyes were hazy, and his breathing was rapid. He practically collapsed beside the bed. His slender fingers clutched Ethan's sleeve, his voice choked with sobs and unbearable pain. "Ethan, I'm in heat. It hurts so much. Can you help me?" Ethan himself was extremely drunk, his mind a chaotic mess. But the familiar pheromones and the sight of this vulnerable, helpless person were like a spark that ignited his most primitive alpha instincts. Nemesis, competition, all of it blurred into obscurity at that moment. He only remembered the sickeningly sweet coconut scent driving him mad, only remembered Julian's misty, pleading eyes. What happened next was chaotic and hazy. He acted on pure instinct, tightly holding the Omega who kept rubbing against him, radiating an intoxicating aroma. His palms felt hot, smooth skin, and his ears were filled with suppressed whimpers and gasps. Following his alpha nature, he lowered his head and bit down hard on the gland on the back of the other's neck, injecting his own pheromones, using the most direct method to soothe the Omega in the throes of heat, knotting inside his body. He sank into that ultimate sensation until he lost consciousness. When he woke up the next morning, he was alone in the room, and he had forgotten everything. The next morning, I woke up in Ethan's arms. The moment my consciousness returned, the feelings in my body resurfaced first. Soreness, especially the distinct, throbbing pain in the back of my neck where I had been temporarily marked. But more than that, there was a sense of security and contentment from being tightly enveloped in a rich coffee pheromone. I moved slightly and met a pair of deep eyes. Ethan had been awake for who knows how long, staring at me without blinking. His expression was complex, filled with lingering passion, the ecstatic joy of having found what was lost, but most of all, a heavy, almost overflowing remorse and heartache. My cheeks flushed instantly. Everything that happened last night was vivid in my mind. An Omega who has been fully bonded will only accept their own alpha's pheromones, which meant Ethan had fully marked me before. I lowered my gaze in embarrassment, my voice as soft as a whisper. Last night, Jules." He spoke, his voice hoarse from the morning, but exceptionally firm. He called me Jules, not the full Julian Sterling. The intimate nickname made my heart skip a beat, and I instinctively looked up at him. "I'll never forget again." He looked at me, each word spoken with the gravity of an oath. "From now on, I will never forget anything about you." His words were like a key, instantly unlocking the years of pent-up grievances and sorrow in my heart. Tears welled up without warning, blurring my vision. My voice was choked and trembling with disbelief. "You finally remember, MMM." He grunted in affirmation, wrapping his arms around me and pulling me into a tight, tight hug. His chin rested on the top of my head, his voice filled with endless fear and self-blame. "I remember everything. I remember graduation night. I remember it was you. I'm sorry, Jules. I'm so sorry for making you endure so much alone." He paused, his arms tightening, his voice trembling with an indescribable excitement and confirmation. "For making you raise our baby alone for so long, through so much hardship. It was my fault." I couldn't hold back any longer and buried my face in his chest, hitting him accusingly. "It's because you're such an idiot it took you so long to remember." Ethan let me beat against his chest. Not only was he not angry, but he let out a low laugh, a sound full of relief and doting affection. He tightened his embrace, holding me deeper, and nuzzled my hair with his chin, his tone unprecedentedly gentle and playfully roguish. "Yeah, I'm such an idiot. What would I do if you ever left me?" He lowered his head. "So I can't live without you, Jules. Our family of 3 will never be apart again." Okay, the end.